Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. But we'll start this meeting today. We've done roll call, so we have quorum. Are there any declarations of interest? That
Yeah, I'll have to declare one for motion number 3.
all right, thank you. All right, anything else? Seeing none, we'll move on. Resolved that the agenda for the March 30th, 2026 Board of Directors special meeting be adopted as presented. I need someone to move that. Paul. Second by G.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's great.
And while we're here, item number 1, Sally is going to provide a presentation.
Right. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time for this special meeting. It is time sensitive. As you will recall, last year in the fall, the board approved a transition plan for the museum, and we were in the midst of phase 1. And this phase is running out pretty soon. And so we've been working very hard to implement it, but the transition plan basically allows for 2 courses of action. One, we're able to successfully find somebody to continue to operate the museum on the site, and we're running an RFP REOI process to determine that. Or we're not able to find somebody, and then we need to spend a period of time to, figure out what we're doing with the collection if that were to occur. So in terms of the actions that we're directed to do, this is the working group that was formed following board direction. Move that out of the way a bit. Not too much, but in any event. So you can see that the provincial trust, the federal MCC, the Lees family, and this is Physical and Health Education Canada. The folks from that organization who are interested, they all declined. So, but we still have a fairly robust group of people who've been actively engaged on the working group. So since November, we hosted an online information session for all the interested groups. We put out the call and were able to successfully recruit in the working group members. We had our initial working group meeting in January where all the members toured the site. They saw the facilities because not all of them had been to the site, given the organizations they were with. We reviewed the mandate, discussed priorities, and then at the next meeting, they were talking about options and potential criteria. And then at the third meeting, they reviewed and commented on the ROI. So they've been very much engaged and participating. And then we just had a recent meeting with them last week that you see at the bottom there on March 25th, where we actually reviewed the ROI results with them and let them see the report that was going to the board and get their comments on the board report. So So the purpose of the REOI, request for expression of interest, was first and foremost to raise interest in and find out who's interested in the museum, but also secondarily for us to find out what those organizations would need from MVCA to take over the museum. Because one of the things we've learned through this whole process is that museums are struggling universally in the province of Ontario, if not farther afield as well. And so to take on a museum in many respects is to take on a liability. And so it's not like your traditional REOI where it's the first step in a bidding process where you're thinking you're going to make money at the end of the day. So we recognize that, there may be things and asks of us. And so that's what the RAOI was also looking to, elucidate from these respondents is what do you need from us to make this work? So at the end of the day, we had 5 submissions, and the Canadian First Basketball Court Inc., I think it's from New Brunswick, so they're not local. Obviously, the Museum of History and Library Archives Canada are federal institutions well positioned to take care of these things, but the collections would move off-site. And part of the pushback we got at the last working group meeting was the definition of local. So personally, and this is me as the author of this report, I considered it local because being internationally renowned Canadians, to have your archive material within basically 50 kilometers of your birthplace on a national and international scale, I felt justified use of the term local. But understandably, the community members who live in Mississippi Mills felt that local meant on the site or within the community. And then both the Textile Museum and the North Lanark Historical Society are located locally. And we're interested in managing the collections at the current site. But the North Lanark Historical Society, we'll get into this in more depth later in the presentation, is actually looking to move their museum onto our site. Okay, so when we issued the RAY, as per the last board meeting, at the fall board meeting, we set down basically the broad strokes of what an agreement would look like. That third party would own the collections, that they would be subject to a lease agreement if they use our site. The buildings they could use would be the old grist mill, belong to the east and the gatehouse. But if they wanted to use other areas of the property, they would have to pay fees like everybody else. And that they would have to pay a rent that would also include the capital renewal costs of the building they'd be in. But it also allowed for potential, sharing of promotional costs, sharing of gate fees, and potential sharing of tenant revenues. If, they would be hosting an event, that, there might be both cost sharing and revenue sharing. So we had that door open for proponents to consider. And we also told folks that, listen, our legislation says anything longer than a 5-year agreement would require ministerial approval. So we, at least out of the gate, we'd be looking for a 5-year lease. So what we heard back, oops, sorry, my plan's not working properly today. Okay. So the requests we heard back from the various submissions and were reduced our, and not just from the submissions, but also from the working group, because the submissions actually were, the working group was advocating for this more so than the proponents in their individual submissions. So MVCA was asked to reduce or charge no rent, that whoever ran the museum could have free use of the entire property without fees. Potentially take a higher percentage of the gate fees than what we had, set out. And then with respect to the North Lanark Regional Museum, who wants to relocate, they're looking to relocate their main museum building and then several smaller buildings. And that perhaps, I mean, they're all big asks, but that's a pretty big ask is number 4. Transfer of the CMOG grant is not in our control, but we did pursue it. So we followed up with the province, and I'll speak more on that. And then transfer of the loan agreement because we have several pieces of the Mackenzie exhibit are actually on long-term loan from the University of Pennsylvania. So we followed up on that as well. So I'm going to talk first about the rent. So when most of us think about rent, just generally, you're thinking about the services that a landlord provides in terms of tenant liaison, coordination and support, move in, move out, things that they're wanting to do. there's repair of damaged building envelope. Obviously, that's generally the responsibility of the landlords. Replacement of aged components. So you want to make sure that the building's in good working order. And then routine and maintenance associated with those things. And then groundkeeping and snow clearing for all those common areas. And then some form of amortization of projected capital costs that the tenant does typically pay for the landlord to do capital renewal on the building. These are typical of what a rent includes. So, but the argument given back was, well, you're paying for it all now. Why would you have to charge us going forward? And what it boils down to, and you'll hear me use this expression several times going forward, is opportunity costs. So in economic terms, that means you're giving up revenues from other sources to allow this arrangement to occur. So if we didn't charge them rent, but we could have had somebody else as a tenant, a category 3 tenant in the building, or use it ourselves for category 1, 2, or 3. So you're giving up a potential use, and that potential use has value. And so that's what we call the opportunity cost. So based upon that concept, and then reflecting the fact that we do have a responsibility as the owners of those buildings to keep them in good functioning order. Like as long as they're accessible to the public, the onus is on us to make sure they're safe structures. And then with respect to the gatehouse, we actually do and will continue to use the gatehouse for MVCA purposes. So on this basis, I'm tabling with you the concept that our goal is to achieve a 50-50 cost share. That we have responsibilities, fiduciary responsibilities for the structures, and that we'll be using at least the gatehouse somewhat ourselves. So, and then associated with this, that it be clearly understood that they'd be accepting those structures and facilities as is, that we're not looking to make any major changes and improvements to those structures to enable them to take occupancy. And if they want any major improvements to those buildings, that those costs need to be borne by that tenant. And that all museum operating costs need to be borne by the operator, that utilities, stuff. So when we presented this to the working group last week, I say there was mixed reaction. On the one hand, some people understood concept, and others understood the concept, but still felt that it should be read.
Sorry to ask a question, but under a 50-50 cost sharing, are you still going to be coming back to the municipalities to fund more of that? Like our initial agreement was for 5 years, and under this cost sharing, is there going to be sufficient money provided by the Mill and Tail itself to cover that?
So, I mean, and this is in part some of the discussion that needs to happen here today.
Right.
So the fiduciary responsibility to keep those buildings in sound condition for health and safety reasons, I would argue, is a category 1. And a lot of other CAs are treating that and that capital cost as a category 1. We haven't necessarily to date. And it's one of those gray areas. So it's a question of how this board wants to treat it. With respect to all the other costs, certainly we use the gatehouse for our ed program, and we rent it out for other things. So it's a category 3. And I would assume that we're doing full cost recovery on those. And that's we're paying our own way on that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of perspective that admittedly is hard to communicate to the working group, because the response one hears is, we'll just go back to the municipalities and ask for the money. So, so I appreciate your question, because it's a hard point to convey. So with respect to the site fees, we have embraced your direction to be full cost recovery, and you'll see that in Q1 of 2026, our bookings in the Milliken Tail are over 50% of total revenues from last year, which were 50% higher than 2024, which were 30,000 higher than 2023. We have been making money at the mill, and we need to continue to if we're going to make our ed program and stewardship programs full cost recovery. And those are programs that the authority has said you want to maintain and continue going forward. We cannot, in my opinion, sacrifice those revenues to enable a museum to use that site free of charge. We are working very, very hard to optimize use of that site. And I'm reticent to allow that to be lost because it undermines both the ed and stewardship programs. As it relates to gate fees and donation boxes, this is a practice we started implementing, I think, 2 years ago, which is, to make sure that the museum was getting credit for the visitors to the museum. And so based upon actual attendance at the museum versus revenues in the parking lot and, doing the numbers, we calculated that between mid-May and mid-October when the museum is open, it's potentially, 65% of gate fees at the Milliken Tail. And so we have been allocating 65% of those revenues to the museum on the books. If you're looking at the numbers and they look a bit weird, it's because in the off months, donations drop down significantly, but we still get tons of people going to the site year round. So if the numbers don't intuitively look right, we check them, they are right. It's just because donations drop off significantly outside of the summer period. So based on this, and because they're based upon actual attendance at the museum, again, we're not inclined to change this. We think it's fair and defensible. And to alter this significantly, we would be depriving the site again, in this case, category 1, because those monies go directly to support operations and maintenance of the conservation area. Oops. Sorry, my hands aren't working today. It happens sometimes. Okay, so now we get to the request from the North Lanark Regional Museum. So this is a museum that's located just outside of Appleton. I drove by it the other day to just get a visual on the buildings. So this is off of their website, these photos that are illustrative of the nature of the museum. And so the thought is that they would relocate these buildings to our site, and from their property, from their site on our property, would manage both museums. So you can see it's the museum, a pioneer cabin, an agricultural display building, and a storage shed. So four buildings. Now, we haven't received any further details on spatial requirements or other sorts of needs, but we did, at least ourselves, identify where conceptually these might go. And so Alex prepared this drawing identifying a hectare at the front of the property that conceivably could house those 4 buildings. But we don't know, what the planning bylaws, whether, they could tie into septic and well, whether there's sufficient space for them to put in their own septic and well. And, would this be a severed, or is this part of our property? And then if we get into the lease agreement questions again, and under what conditions, and with the land be given for free, etc. So it's not just a big ask, but it's kind of a complex ask because there's so much more involved in considering this as a potential option. So lastly, we come to the lease agreement, and we checked around with some other CAs, and they are in the same position as us. where they've given up museum operations and turned it over to a third party to own and operate. They're typically entering into 10 to 15-year leases.
Right.
I just want to ask, because there's an apparent paradox or contradiction. Page 6 of the report says that the expenses of chicken from other sources for similar buildings range from 50 to 20 years and contain renewal clauses.
Oh, if that's what it says in the report, probably my PowerPoint's wrong. Thank you, Mary Lou.
Okay,
Yeah.
and they, I think, because of the nature of them, they all contain that renewal clause.
Yeah.
Because the intent, I think, of the ask for 99 years is like 4 generations, which is almost forever. And that's a long time. But these are the typical ones that we created. So it's 15 to 20. It would take almost 20 years to recoup capital costs involved in moving anything there or setting anything up or improve, or even without the museum proposal, improving and keeping up the mill itself. Okay, just wanted to point that out. Because it went
Thank you for
point.
catching that. Okey-doke, oops.
Even though, sorry, I just thought of this when I looked at it again. Even though 5 years plus requires provincial approval, obviously, the second point implies, or more than implies, that it is possible.
Yes. The fact that other CAs, because a couple of them that I looked at, one predated our new regs, but the other postdated our new regs. So the fact that they had successfully got ministerial approval says it is possible. Okay. Yeah. Go back a slide, please. It's just the one tweet.
So,
Yeah. Wonder why it, that's weird.
wait, so the rest of-
Yeah, sorry, technical issues in our end. We'll get it figured out. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you don't.
That's fine.
Sorry, the hands are just not working today. I have essential tremor. And there are days when it works, they work, and other days they don't work. Del Roberts, right there. Okay, thank you, Kelly. Okay, so CMOG, interesting response we got from that. And Scott, kudos to his diligence, because they really didn't want to answer this question, and it took some persistence. And so they said they'll consider it. That was the best that we would get out of them. So
Sorry. Sorry to bother you, but Scott, it might be Scott's answer through you. The new, what's the definition of a new owner / operator?
you go ahead, Scott.
So in speaking with the folks at CMOG, so the grant itself is closed. You can't apply for any new money. So any new person coming in here to create a new museum that doesn't exist today, to showcase whatever you want to showcase, there is no opportunity to get any more grants out. Similarly, there is no opportunity to increase the amount of funding. We did go back to one point and ask for an increase of funding. So it's all stagnant across the board. So basically, anybody that's considered new is anybody that is not us applying for our spot. So for that museum spot, for our organization as MVCA to apply for that, we needed to get their approval to at least say that we'd be open to transferring that application process to a group that is taking over the museum. Because it's not the same it's not the same group that's applying for the funding, so technically it would kind of go across what they're saying is what the regulations are. But they've said that they couldn't guarantee that the group would be successful in terms of getting the funding, but they said at least they'd be open to that group taking over our funding application spot. Is how they determined it.
So they would become your owner, they become the slash operator.
Well, no, in this case, they would be both the owner and the operator. We're looking to pass on ownership of the collection and the operation of the museum. So all they've said is they're not going to guarantee that the funding is going to go ahead to the new group. They've said that the group is going to be eligible to at least apply in our position. Essentially, it would put us under the same constraints that we're on. So we need to meet their funding requirements on a year-to-year basis to remain eligible for that funding. It's my understanding that the group would be falling under those same premises to be able to be eligible for the funding. They would have to maintain the proper procedures and the proper protocols in place to be eligible for a year-to-year funding.
Okay, it's because the museum exists. Transfer of ownership may change, but that is not a brand new museum. It is an existing museum.
It's probably the only thing that would allow for that transfer. If it was a new museum, it probably would have not been eligible, but in this case, I think that's what's opening the door to this.
Thank you, Scott. Jeff, did you have one?
Yeah, I was just curious if, would that still apply? We've got 2 museums that have submitted interest. If they're already receiving a CMOG, this would mean they could double dip. Or this be something that we could do in terms of the new operator, as long as it meets the criteria to qualify, allows us to meet the criteria to qualify for the grant. We can still receive it and transfer the money. We'll do this. Because that way we're still getting it, we're still holding our place. As long as they meet the requirements to achieve the goal, we'll transfer it to them. If they fail, then they lose it. That way we don't have to worry about the government changing its mind, just saying no.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting way to look at it. And they didn't clarify whether the successful proponent would already be getting CMOG funding or not. I think in a couple of situations, one it is possible and in another it's not. But we didn't quite go far into those into that fine of details.
It's the question of how we're qualifying for the funding.
Okay, so Scott also reached out to Pennsylvania University and they're definitely amenable. So we have in writing from them that they're definitely open to that, which was good news. I think there's one more slide. Yeah. Okay, so and the last piece of good news was they did give us the province did give us a month extension on developing our update to the strategic plan. So we built that into a revised timeline. So we're now looking to issue the RFP April 17th. It closed in May. We're looking to have a meeting of the PNP in June for the PNP to review this and make recommendations to the board, and that would happen in July, and that would give us just enough time to get the strategic plan into the province by the end of the month. So it's still a tight schedule, but at least we have a little bit more breathing room, and we've built it mainly into the front end to allow the applicants more time to develop their business cases and prepare a response. So stop sharing. Thank you. Sure.
Okay, so we have 3 motions. We're just going to get it on the floor so we can discuss it. The first one is approve the scoping of the Milton Hill Museum request for proposal and recommended in this report. Second one is direct work group members with potential conflict of interest be required to step down for the RFP development and review process. 3, direct staff to include or exclude the potential allocation of land at the Milliken Hill Conservation Area in the RFP for the siting of the new museum as requested by North Lanark Historical Society. I need someone to move that. Paul, I'll second it. Jeff. Okay, so the floor is open now to discuss the 3 terms. Bill.
So, everyone knows I'm a real proponent of keeping the Milton Taylor where these passages. And I haven't taken this to council yet. But I'd like to throw something else out that the museum itself, the actual physical museum and the property around it is really part of the collection in my mind. For two reasons. Number one, the spirit, I realize that the Conservation Authority, by the letter of the law, owns that property, but the spirit in which it became part of the Conservation Authority always anticipated, and I talked to the nephew of the people, the Lee family. They really did believe that by doing this, that museum would be maintained in that location to perpetuity. Now, that's not, it is the legal point. The other point is that the artifacts, particularly the Art Tate Mackenzie, they're essentially, a lot of them are plasters of his sculptures. They're very valuable, but they're also very delicate. And some of them are huge. And in order to move them out, if anybody's been to the museum, you realize that the museum is upstairs and there's a little tiny narrow space of a staircase about 2.5 feet wide that winds down. In order to take those out of there, you would have to essentially make the windows bigger because even they are too small. So I'm proposing, and I say this back.
Sorry.
That the museum be considered as part of the collection. And I'd like to propose to our council that we would take ownership of the museum and the immediate ground, not the whole property, just, the immediate property along with the collection, and then hire someone to be the curator anyway, I just throw that out there for some discussion. I strongly believe that building is of no value to the CA if it's essentially going to have to be, re-rented every 5 years or whatever to the museum. And if there is a board running it that's responsible for maintaining that collection and fundraising to maintain it, I think that would make it viable. I don't know who, if even the two museums that have put it in there, like how they could ever afford to pay rent for the actual building and retain that collection. Anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Paul's first, and Johnson.
I like what I'm hearing from Beth, because my basic question is, okay, we have a couple of local museums wanting to do this, but do they have the financial resources backing to actually do it? And what happens 3 years down the road when they find out that it's not viable? We just have kicked it down, and now we've got a bigger problem because now we have more stuff on the property to deal with because these museums couldn't make a go of it. Whereas I like the aspect that if Mississippi Mills is taking it over, then it's backstopped by the municipality and they're guaranteed. Because I don't know if these other museums they're an independent body, right? So they could go bankrupt or they could run out of money if the interest faded or whatever. So anyways, that's my question is who's backstopping them for all this money to make sure that we're not taking on another liability risk.
Let's go to Beth, Angela.
You're absolutely right. They're incorporated nonprofits, but they're run by boards. And we all know that museums are kind of not as popular as it used to be. And if I think of the Appleton Museum, all it would take is a couple of directors to resign, and then you wouldn't have a functioning board anymore. So what happens? I think it's important to have them try to figure out what they might or might not do. They're not they're not ever going to, make millions, let's put it that way. But I feel that perhaps if I talk to the council. So, if you're considering that proposal, I'd like it deferred till after we have a council meeting, so I can tell them what I've told.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I just have a question. Does the textile museum own the building that it operates out of, or is it owned by Mississippi Metals and leased to the museum?
Originally it was owned by Mississippi Mills. And they were supposed to pay for it, never could, so it was actually donated by a previous council to the textile.
To the textile museum, okay. Yeah, that was one. Second, I think that it's an interesting proposal to have, it'd be nice to see Mississippi Mills respond to the RFP. But the simplest way for Mississippi Mills to do this would be to have it just assume 100% of the category 3 costs. And sign another 5-year agreement with the MVCA to just assume all of the costs associated with the museum and its operation, so it's lifted off of the for the other municipalities. That might be the cleanest way to do something like that. Because we're looking at about $119,000 a year.
What it was, it fluctuates year over year, especially with the revenues changing, but yeah. I say on average in the order of 100, it's gonna be plus.
Yeah, so it'd basically be an extra $100,000 a year for Mississippi Mills to just agree to keep it going as is with the NBC operating it, or another agreement could be made. That also buys another 5 years to figure things out. Maybe the current provincial government will be gone by then, and the rules will be changed again. Can only hope. But that's that's what's interesting, and that might be the proposal to take to your council, is that if it's not just we're gonna take it over, we're gonna own it. It's just that we're gonna assume the category 3 costs for it entirely, and maybe you convince another municipality to go in.
I'm gonna go to Jeannie first.
Well, they kind of captured what I was kind of thinking, just one caveat. So when you had mentioned about taking just a very specific, not the whole property. Again, I think Sally referenced this in earlier about, what's involved in that as far as planning or. But Jeff's suggestion about doing the whole thing just takes that out of the mix, which is great. So just something to think about too. I agree. I think it's an interesting proposal.
Eric?
In terms of the town or municipality assuming 100% of the cost for the category 3, without having any ownership, without having any possibility of earning revenue, as a member of a council who first heard about this today, I don't think that would fly very far, because numbers that go back and forth, even at this table, but the cost, the $110,000 worth of revenue that was cited, and there is a slide that went up about the cost of the mill and the programs. A huge chunk of that is category 3, but it's the science camps, which this board is very interested in keeping. Am I correct? So to say that the town of the municipality of Mississippi Mills would assume those costs is not really on. You'd have to separate the true cost of running the building alone from the cost of staffing it or paying utilities or etc. Obviously, paying the utilities and maintenance and staffing, yes, would be part of the municipality's responsibility. And it isn't an impossible barrier, because it's simply a matter of when we sit down to negotiate something, we come up with a proposal that fits and allows the MVCA to do what they want to do on the property, and allows the municipality to be able to run the museum and also operate some programs out of the museum and do it in a spirit of sharing and cooperating, not sharing, but cooperation.
So,
So I definitely think that that's a workable solution. Like, so I am fully supportive of the municipality submitting and responding to the RFP. I think it is important, to your point, when we've been talking about 100% category 3 costs for the museum, you have to remember there's the cost, but there's also the revenues. So the museum is not without revenues, right? It gets a grant from Mississippi Mills. It gets the CMOG grant. You know, we've been getting revenues through our gift shop because we've been really pushing that last year. You know, and so there are other sources of revenues such that at the end of the day, the municipality is looking to cover 100% of the category 3 costs. As well, if the concept is to retain, you know, the textile museum to manage the museum, well, then they're just paying a portion of that curator's cost, not the full cost like we're doing, right? And, you know, the insurance costs for the collection, you know, would fall under the municipality's costs. And I'm guessing you might get a better rate than we do, you know? So there's all sorts of things that might lessen that from 100% down significantly, such that when we then talk about the sharing of those actual physical, you know, things on the property, like the structural, you know, capital renewal, like the shared space, that it's not prohibitive, right? It's a fair distribution of costs. And I'm putting to you 50-50 for the purpose of the RFP so that it provides, you know, broad strokes so that people responding can develop business cases based upon something, right? They need something to go from. But ultimately, whatever we receive back at the end of the day will be subject to negotiation and approval by this board. And so if a workable solution, something that we can, you know, I'll feel good about, it comes to the table, I don't see why that wouldn't be a viable option. So I still think it's important for the board, in the absence of knowing whether the municipality is going to submit, to sign off on the assumptions for the RFP, because I think that they're defensible. And then the real question is whether or not you want to entertain a proposal that sees another museum relocating onto that site.
Kathy, you have a question?
Yes, so just in terms of what we would pass today if we voted on this motion, we're simply going out for an RFP. This is not a decision on how this is going to go. This is not a decision at all on what the end result might be. Depending on who responds to the RFP, depending on what people come up with, there's always an opportunity to change this, right? Am I right?
Correct.
See, the issue I have is that in these types of things, there's a lot of conflict of interest. And I'm not, I mean, I wasn't on that group that looked at this, but people are going to have to step off already because they have conflict of interest. And, you know, it's a very, very difficult thing because you wear so many hats at all of these things, right? Getting information from other groups is really important. But at the end of the day, what we have to decide here is what's best for the Conservation Authority. And that's the challenge you have when you come on to something like this. Like, yes, you know, we look at it and say, well, how is this good for the city of Ottawa? But that's not really how we're supposed to be thinking on this board, right? When you're on the board, you're advocating for the betterment of this organization, which is this organization alone. Because we all care about all of the municipalities and we care about all the different groups, that makes it a lot harder. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think what we need to do for the Conservation Authority is to go out with an RFP and see what happens. Because we have to keep moving forward with this and figure out what's best for the Conservation Authority where this is concerned. So I guess I would just say to address the fact that maybe other people haven't weighed in, there is still that opportunity. Is that true? There's still an opportunity for other groups to weigh in?
To bid, so to speak, yes.
Well, and to give us their feedback.
Oh, always.
Always. Okay, so I think I'm just generally supportive of us doing this so we can get moving on this and then see what happens next.
Thank you, Kathy. Any further questions or discussions?
I would ask.
Yeah, this on motion number 3 that I read out about including or excluding the potential allocation of land at the Milton Hill Conservation Area to move the museum to that land. We had some conversation about that, so I get a sense of what the board wants to do with that. The staff is asking whether to include it or exclude it. Jeff?
I think at this point, it's safe, it's excluding, they effectively boot the North Atlantic Museum's proposal of kids' consideration. I think including it gives them an opportunity to better make their case about whether or not, like, they can tell us how they're going to accomplish this. Like, are we looking at a 20 or a 30-year plan for these buildings? They can't have a lot of money if it involves selling the land they currently sit on. It's just, I'm curious about how it would work. And if, because if it's viable, it's worth consideration. But I would support including it for now.
Well, your response?
My only concern in that is, to the best of my knowledge, and Bev, you might have other information on this. No investigations have been made to date by the museum to even make those specific investigations themselves. And given our timelines, I'm not confident that they will have the wherewithal to do that. Handedly, if this was something that they really wanted to do, they would have been doing stuff. And I'm not hearing that they're, contacting moving companies about what would it cost. They're not asking us, can we hook into and have somebody come to your property and assess, servicing constraints? Is there an opportunity for well? Like, I'm not seeing any of the signs that one would anticipate seeing from somebody who really is a going concern and wants to make this happen.
You declared a conflict of interest in item 3.
Oh, yeah, I can't comment. Yeah.
All right. Very good.
Just a comment, and I haven't talked to him about it. But yes, I can understand what you're saying. I can understand what Jeff is saying. On the one hand, if we exclude it now, you say several people, like an entire board, a lot of effort. On the other hand, if you include it, you must remember that you're dealing with small C conservative Lanark County residents of a certain age. And they're the last people that I know who would start putting a lot of effort into hypotheticals. So that to say that you'd have no proof or evidence that they've been serious about it because they haven't done anything yet, I would suggest that you wouldn't expect that until such time as it would be way down and acceptable possible. However, as a side, you did show a map that positioned most of what would be the Historical Society Museum on one part of the property, which is diagonally opposite to the mill. Don't think you could get it much further away. And I don't think that would work as a unified concept. And I don't think it would be well received by them, so it would obviously be countered, which would lead to more complexity. And the report does say there's been no discussion on that.
Adam? Go ahead, John.
Just a clarification, if we were to exclude potential allocation of land, does that mean that the North Lanark Museum would not fit it? I mean, it seemed to me they were just exploring. It's hard for me to understand whether that's an actual requirement or they were just sort of asking about it. Because they could still potentially bid on running this and maintain their museum at the same location they have now. In fact, in exploring it, they may find that they obviously don't have the resources to do it. So I'm not sure that we're actually excluding them, that's my question.
So I would say that it's unclear from their submission whether it would only, I mean, they positioned it as, hey, you know, we'd like to maybe move our museum there. But certainly, as I said in response to Kathy, anybody can come forward at this point and submit, and they could submit staying in Appleton. I think a couple of things that's important to realize is, so the chair of the North Lanark Board sits on the working group meeting. And when we met last Wednesday, she said, and the Appleton Museum sits on municipal land. And at that meeting, she said, no, we haven't entered into any conversations with the municipality about this proposal. And I felt that was quite telling. That's the chair, who is not aged. It's younger than by quite some. So, you know, if the chair of the board is not making the moves to investigate with the municipality the relocation of those facilities, I can't see that their heart is in that. They're not invested and committed to it.
Well,
Well, I guess I made the motion and I don't think we should close any door at this time. Somebody may walk in tomorrow to North Lanark Museum and say, hey, by the way, Joe just left you $6 million to run your museum. And, you know, that's the nature of the beast in this type of thing, right? Like, you know, it has happened, but I don't think closing any door at this time makes sense to preclude it. And I don't think there's any risk in having it there. If they come in and then you go, you ask the simple question, how are you planning to do this? And they don't have anything, then obviously the word safe that. So I just go ahead and leave it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I kind of agree with that. With where we're looking at potential allocation, if they want land, they're gonna have to give us a list. Can we not identify that, you know, if you're including land in your submission, you need to submit these reports or answer these questions before the board will consider a proposal with land? Because maybe they have a really good idea. Or like, well, not, but maybe they do. You don't. Yeah, I think we shouldn't close any doors, just state what we need from them in order to consider a proposal that includes other land.
wait,
Well, on your points, I'm just wondering if the board does not want anything moved on to the conservation property, why drag them along thinking that they can? That's the opposite sort of side of your argument. Like, why have them waste time if they literally really want to move? And do we as a board want them on property? I have to ask also is, why do they want to move their museum onto this site? Is it because they're not making money, or they think they can make money by doing this? And do you want, if you're only leasing them the land for 5 or 10 years, do you want, what happens at the end of that lease? Who's responsible for removing those buildings? Or who takes ownership of buildings? So that's some questions I think you should be asking.
Jean,
Yeah, so to follow up on what Wayne just said, and be cognizant of the time frame, I would be probably more leaning towards excluding them. For the major reason that why waste their time, but also the time constraints we're under, so that's mine.
Janet,
And yeah, and just one more on that is, and Mary, you made the comment about the proposed location. You know, that is conservation land. And siting it closer to the mill, I mean, you're going to be destroying sensitive ecological areas. So they can't just put this thing anywhere. And I think it was Scott or somebody or Alex who proposed there, it's probably the least impact ecologically, in terms of on the site. And so I think there's again, you'd have to sort of restrict or let them know that they can't just, propose that you put this thing anywhere. I just think, and if Sally used the word complexity, I think this adds a whole layer of complexity to trying to evaluate a bid. I think as a member of many volunteer boards, I think it puts a huge burden on a volunteer board that sounds like it is already strained. So my view would be, why are we complicating this any more than we need to? They have a site they're currently operating out of that the city, that the town, knows how to fund. I am basically leaning towards excluding potential allocation. That's me.
Any other comments about that? Because right now I'm getting a 50-50 sense here. Kathy?
I would just say, like, just contemplating that somebody gets $6 million from, Uncle Fred. I just think that excluding it just excludes it, like you just never know what'll happen. You put it in there, doesn't mean it's going to happen. I think you put it in there and then they look at it and go, oh yeah, this is too complicated. And so they don't, they don't bid, they don't get involved. I don't think there's a great value in not including it. If they've talked about it, say, sure, you know what, put your money where your mouth is, or get your act together and let's see what you think. I don't think you should exclude it at this point, given that it's been talked about.
In connection with that, think of it this way. If we excluded, we've rejected them. But given the complexity, given the demands that would be required in order to put forth a successful bid, if they choose not to, then they have excluded themselves and kept a relationship. So they've made the choice rather than us making the choice for them. And I'm not saying which one is best. No, it's just a difficult, do we make that decision?
Yeah.
Well, it's not up to us to decide what another board may or may not do, or what they can or cannot do. They can do whatever they want. For us to say they won't submit it, or they can't submit it, or they don't have the volunteers, it's not really our decision.
No, but it is our decision to decide whether or not we want them there.
Well, we still have the opportunity to make that decision, even after.
Maybe I just read the motion and we vote on it. Okay, we're gonna read first two, and we'll vote on it. I think there's what's the third one? That's a little more complicated. So, approves. All right, okay. Approve scoping of the Milliken Hill Museum request for proposal as recommended in this report. All in favor? That's carried. Direct the working group members with a potential conflict of interest be required to step down for the RFP development.
You can't do this.
You want to on the floor for each one?
You would need a motion for each section under that circumstances instead of the overall motion, because the overall motion was passed on.
Yeah.
So you would need to go back and make.
Okay, that's fine. We had a discussion.
It was fine.
Yeah, okay, so we'll go back to the first. So I need a mover and a seconder for this one. Approve scoping of the Milliken Hill Museum request for proposal as recommended in this report. I need someone to move that. Jeannie. Seconder, Jeff. All in favor? Carried. And I need a mover and a seconder for this one. Direct that the working group members with potential conflict of interest be required to step down for the RFP development and review process. I need someone to move that. Jeff. And then Helen. Second it. All in favor? Carried. Okay, I need someone to move the third motion and second. Direct staff to include the potential allocation of land at the Mill of Kintail Conservation Area in the RFP for the siting of a new museum as requested by the North Lanark Historical Society. I need someone to move that. Wayne, seconded by Jeff. This is to include. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You got 7? Opposed? 1, 2, 3. So 4. She can't vote. 4. 7 to 4, so it will be included.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the previous motion that I had on the floor, I would like to withdraw. To clarify your books, because you never acted upon.
Right.
It would need to be voted on, defeated, or I need to withdraw.
Okay,
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Friday, Jeff won't withdraw. Okay.
Right, okay, so now that we've included it, there's one more motion. So I'll read it out. Direct the following RFP conditions to be imposed on a new museum proposal. A, that. And this is where we can put any conditions in there for them coming on her land. Staff is looking for suggestions.
I think they would have to identify how all services and utilities would be provided. Which would include septic evaluations and hydro and whatever else we need utilities. Parking,
Financial backing,
yeah,
how are they gonna do any of this? Yeah.
I think we need a longer lease if we're looking at putting septic pits on us. 5 years isn't gonna cut it.
No. Mr. Chair, I'll need to abstain from this one also.
Okay. Yes.
So one of the things that's not clear from their submission is if they're looking to actually sever the parcel. So, because somebody mentioned lease, yeah. So are we only looking at a lease option? Would the board contemplate severance? If you're contemplating severance, at what cost? If lease, at what cost?
Is that even possible? Yeah.
So they'd have to have planning approval in principle or something, or at least demonstrate that the bylaws allow.
Yeah,
So, but the first question is, does the board even want to contemplate severing land?
No.
No.
Okay, that's helpful.
Kathy?
I guess I find this challenging because I just would think that a legal eye should be on this, maybe to see what other conditions are important. I don't know if I know what else should be on there. So, I mean, I'm wondering if that could be that our legal counsel advise us or come up with the conditions, or I don't know if there was something very specific that we had to know about, but I don't know if I'm able to say right now, would severing be off the table? Like, yeah, I don't know. I would rather somebody with a legal brain look at the conditions.
We can take these considerations and bring them to legal for advice.
So my only comment, and sorry, then I'll turn it over to Janet there. I'm reticent to get a lawyer too heavily involved at this stage if we want to have some latitude to negotiate things, and lawyers tend to make RFPs long and complicated. And so that's why I'm looking more for principles as opposed to legalese. So the principle of, would we contemplate severance or no? Would we contemplate lease free of charge, like $1 a year? Is that the basis? Or would we charge for that land? Would we allow them to tie into an existing septic and well system or not? You know, so it's
Capacity.
you know, these are at more high levels so that they have the broad strokes to develop their business case. Because I feel that if we go too far down a legal route, it might jeopardize other discussions around other proposals. And so if we overburden this particular option with a lot of legalese, it will stand out as burdensome compared to the rest of the RFP.
Very good.
I just wanted to ask for clarification, because I think you lost me. You might not have lost anybody else around this table. Well, could we go back and say what sorts of things must be included? Could you tell me that again? My understanding is that you want them to include a plan for locating buildings, a plan for financial, what's the word, obligations, security, and proof of financial ability to assume the responsibility. Okay, now my question is back to, is that what we originally started to talk about? And is that enough to put in there, number 4? Or do you want more to be required in that clause?
So part of them obtaining financial security, if they were to go to a bank, the bank's gonna wanna know, are you owning the land or are you leasing the land?
Mm-hmm.
What is your financial obligation associated with that property? So, you know, are you gonna be charged a rent or not? So that's why I'm looking for those broad stroke assumptions so that they could go to the municipality or to a lender or, you know, Joe who won $1 million or whatever, right? That they need to have those broad strokes understanding of, yes, you would get a portion of property, you get it for free or not. You're gonna be on the hook for your own septic and well, they don't wanna tie into the museum one, etc. Whether or not, for instance, sorry, one more thing. And sorry, we're having this kind of discussion the way we are, but there's just so many things that could be contemplated with this proposal. So for example, will we have a shared parking lot? So would they pay to expand our parking lot rather than trying to house their own, right? Because often it's cheaper, more efficient to expand a shared parking lot, right? So you can see that, you know, further to Jenna's point, you know, you go down this road and you're now opening a whole lot of other unanswered questions.
I voted against it.
That's another
So I do have a comment I wanted to get in here. Another restriction I want is where they could propose to.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't want it on any of the conservation lands that are, you know, ecologically important. And so I think, you know, if you could actually just restrict it even just to that field area near the beginning. And say that the only place they can propose it is in that area. And yeah, so because I don't want to see it in the river, I don't want to see the trees cut down, you know, all the usual things. I mean, that's a conservation area first. And I think probably the original owners would have been saying the same thing. That's why they built the thing there. So anyway, that's my main issue. And yes, all these complexities are why I voted against it, including it in the first place.
Getting in the weeds.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Concerns, questions? Helen?
Yeah, I'm beginning to wish I maybe had voted to exclude it too, because we seem to be making this RFP for one particular group.
Right.
I think we need to make this is what we want as a conservation authority. Do we want things moving around and doing this and doing that? No, we probably don't. So why are we doing this? It sounds like we're making this request for proposal just for one specific group. And now the other groups are gonna think, oh, I never thought about that, or I never did this. I think it's very weird to me. Because somebody's gonna get this request for proposal, they're wondering what's going on, except the people that we're making this for. This group.
Kathy?
Maybe it might be easiest to say something like that does not adversely affect the Conservation Authority, you know, and it's like its ultimate goals. You know, I mean, that's broad enough. And then they propose whatever the heck they want. And then we determine that's our lens, you know, like that's the whole purpose of this.
Yeah.
You could also limit it to just following from Janet's point, there's a lot number on that map you showed us. You could just limit your proposal to having it happen in that area, not because that's currently a field parking lot. For the most part, right now, there's some nesting going on in there, but just limit it to that key. So they understand it's not going down by the mill, and it's not going to set the center.
Just,
Did you have another comment? Your hand's up.
well, just to add up, like you could say does not adversely affect, the conservation authority, or you could say, or its mission, vision, and values, or its ultimate strategic plan goals, or, those types of things then give you a lot of flexibility when you're actually reviewing it all to say, well, in fact, this is good, but it creates all these other problems over here for the conservation authority, so it's not on. I don't know. It might be easiest to do that.
I don't know if it's possible to do this in there, but you could actually ask whether proposing to move a museum or to use a new part of the site be proposed as an option or alternative, rather than as an integral part of a proposal. And so the thinking could be that the Man Art Museum is being kind of given this push to say, think about just taking on the current collection. And if you wish, you can add an option to move your current museum. And that actually then I think really puts the decision over to them while allowing them to still bid on something that is perhaps better within their scope, if you know what I'm saying. So you could propose it that way.
You have,
Yeah,
so how you gonna read this?
well, may I?
Go ahead, go ahead.
So I wasn't sure where this was gonna go. So as you saw the motion, it's sort of, what does it say here? RFP conditions be imposed on a new museum that. I think you've given me enough that I can go away and figure it out. So rather than trying to wordsmith a motion, I think I have a feel for where you're at as a board. And if you're comfortable just giving me direction to address the comments that we've heard today, then I'll just go away and make that happen. Okay, great, thank you.
I'm gonna read the motion.
But I don't think you need to. No, but the fifth one.
It's just,
Ask. You need to ask the question.
Beverly, are you removing yourself as a board member
Yes.
on, not this board?
No, yeah,
Okay.
board member representative on that working group,
Okay, so then we need a new representative on the working group from this board. That been volunteers.
There you go.
Oh,
That way I'm far enough outside everything.
so I'll read this motion. Approve that Paul Kehoe to assume the motion as MVCA Board of Director representative on the museum working group. Need someone to move that? Jeannie. Seconded by Jeff. All in favor? Carried. Roll.
I think I'm gonna do a good job at that, but.
Or then this one.
Yep.
Okay.
Last motion, resolve that the Board of Directors special meeting be adjourned, moved by Paul. Second by Helen. All in favor? Carried. We'll take a five, well, Janet is the chair of the next meeting.
Yes. 5-minute break.
So we're taking a 5-minute break before resuming F&A.
And we'll stay on this Zoom link, eh?
Yeah. Oh, I don't sit on that.
That's a tough meeting.
Hey?
Well,
No one challenged. Oh, no. Well, listen, when they initially moved, I thought when I think we went to a three all together.
Right.
In the spirit of delicious, by the way.
No.
I do. Because they're.
First two, not 5 minutes max. Right.
If somebody wants.
Anyway.
Oh, I know.
You have an attendance.
Yeah. Big word. See my ball.
And now, I guess. Thank you.
I don't think this stuff. It's not wrong, it's fine.